Greetings and welcome back to another edition of the DVD Shelf for Flix, the show that would rather high-five a good movie than elbow the skull of a bad one. Now every movie I feature is one that I enjoy, however not all movies are created equal, which is why at the end I will be using this scale to rate them. Today's feature is one that has been requested multiple times, and when it came out it took the martial arts movie world by storm. That's right, it's time to review the Ong-Bak Trilogy from Thailand. Ong-Bak was initially released in 2003 overseas, and then, in 2005, it was brought to the US with a slightly shorter cut, retitled as Ong-Bak the Thai Warrior. The version of the movie I have seen and am reviewing is the full Thai release that I acquired a year or so before the US release, so you may notice the subtitles are not really up to par in some of the clips I show. But they're good enough for me to be able to follow the story, so stop looking like a suck and let's get on with the show. The story of Ong-Bak follows Ting, a naive Muay Thai fighter from a small rural village as he travels to the big city after a Buddha head is stolen from his village by that prick Don. And the superstitious townfolk blame this theft for the recent drought. The search for this Buddha's head leads Ting to Bangkok, where he encounters a couple of con artists named Moy and George, or Dirty Balls, depending on the version of the film you get to see. That's right, one version of this film has his city name be Dirty Balls, and I don't think I want to know why. But my version calls him George, so that's what I'll call him. And it turns out George is actually named Hom Lay and is from the same village as Ting. Together, the three of them work to recover the stolen Buddha's head, and along the way encounter plenty of thugs, underground fights, and a wheelchair-bound gangster with a tracheotomy. This movie was really made to show off Tony Jaa to the world, and show him off it did. It features Jaa doing all of his own stunts without any wire work nor CGI enhancement for himself, which is fairly impressive given all he does throughout the movie. To better show off Jaa, the director chose to employ instant replays, usually from different angles and in slow motion, just so that you can see some of these hard hits or fun acrobatics again in all of their glory. Now, as far as the action goes, the opening sequence gives you a taste of how hard-hitting the stunts are going to be in this film, with stuntmen falling out of a tree, slamming into large branches on the way down with full force. The fight scenes look just as painful, with Jaa actually making full contact with a large portion of his hits against the poor stuntmen. Though sometimes they are a bit basic in terms of choreography. There are no real lengthy, ballet-esque choreographed fight scenes here, just fast, brutal, painful-looking fights as Ting destroys everyone in his way. Quite honestly, if you're not interested in martial arts, then this is probably not a movie for you. It doesn't strive to be anything greater than a glorified and extended demo reel for Tony Jaa. And that's not to say the storyline is terrible, a little goofy at times, but still very much watchable. There just isn't anything really special here. Now, had you asked me years ago when I first watched it what I would rate it, I would have easily said a 5, hands down. When this film came out, it was fresh and fun and relatively unique in its full contact brutality. So, I forgave some of the shortcomings as I embraced this as a great piece of martial arts cinema. However, with all of the great martial arts and action movies that have come out since then, including Gareth Evans' wonderfully action-packed and brutal films Morantau and the Raid series, Ong-Bak honestly lacks in comparison. So, for me, it's no longer as much of a must-see as it once was, but it is still a lot of fun and Tony Jaa is certainly very talented, so I'll have to give it a 4. Go out there and grab it when you get a chance. It may be overshadowed by more recent martial arts films, but it's still a very fun film that any martial arts enthusiast should watch at some point. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, my copy happens to be an import from overseas. But since Ong-Bak did receive an American theatrical release, and thus an American DVD and Blu-ray release, it should be pretty easy to find, albeit with a slightly shorter cut. Now brace yourselves because it only goes downhill from here. Following the cult status of Ong-Bak, Tony Jaa became an instant sensation in the martial arts film world and went on to make Tom Yum-Goong, released in America as The Protector, which was sometimes incorrectly titled as Ong-Bak 2 to play off the popularity of Ong-Bak. Realizing the popularity of the first film and Jaa's continuing popularity after Tom Yum-Goong, The writer of Ong-Bak and Tony Jaa's mentor, the late Pana Ritchakrai, decided to revisit Ong-Bak by co-directing and co-writing with Tony Jaa its two-part sequel in Ong-Bak 2 and 3, which were released in 2008 and 2010 respectively. Now, even though these films are titled 2 and 3, they are in fact a prequel of sorts, and that's part one of the problems. These movies have about as much to do with Ong-Bak as The Protector did, which is to say nothing. Okay, maybe not nothing. Tony Jaa is in the Ong-Bak pre-sequels, and we see the statue that had its head stolen in the original film. So, there you go. They're connected. Barely. But really, these films should not have been titled Ong-Bak 2 and 3, and it's obvious they were just trying to capitalize on the popularity of the first movie, much like the people who titled Tom Yum-Goong as Ong-Bak 2, and then loosely tacked on some vague connection to the first movie. Okay, enough nitpicking over semantics. So, how about the story? Ong-Bak 2 follows Tony Jaa's Tien, a former noble whose parents were murdered when he was younger, leaving him to strive for vengeance against the perpetrators after being taken in by a mysterious and talented band of martial artists and thieves. Sounds a little like Batman, except set in the 1400s in Thailand, and less gravelly voiced, and less coherent, and not as cool. Okay, fine, it's really nothing like Batman. After Tien catches the eye of a group of thieves, they take him in and teach him how to fight, and he becomes one of the most dangerous men around, so he decides it's time for vengeance against those that killed his parents. The story here is weaker than before, and has more fantasy elements, which is a stark contrast to the more reality-based Ong-Bak. And the story is much more disjointed and sometimes just odd, and the incredibly abrupt ending that is an obvious lead-in to the third movie felt hollow and way too sudden. Now there's a reason for this abrupt ending, as the film had a troubled production. Now I haven't been able to nail down the specifics of what really happened here, but for approximately 2 months, Tony Jaa disappeared from the set. Some say that Jaa was acting peculiar and sacrificing animals on set as part of some bizarre ritual and then disappeared. Jaa himself claims there was a funding issue that caused it. Meanwhile, a producer for Ong-Bak 2, who was also the director for the first film, states that Tony Jaa simply vanished from the set for 2 months for no reason, costing the production a large sum of money when certain obligations were unable to be met. Whatever really happened, it shows in the final product, as the abrupt ending was chosen so that they could meet the new production deadline once filming started up again. And so they decided to just end this movie and finish up the story with a sequel in Ong-Bak 3. Still, even with all the lameness of this film, it does have some really fun and solid fight scenes in there. But that's about all this movie has going for it, and it should be a shame to call itself Ong-Bak 2. So, I guess I should rate this, and that rating is a 2. If it's free, and you have some time to kill, give it a watch and at least enjoy the fight scenes. As I mentioned, this film leads directly into the third film, and that one I don't even really feel like giving a thorough review. Honestly, I don't even own it. After the disappointment of Ong-Bak 2, I decided to rent Ong-Bak 3 first, and I'm glad I did. Ong-Bak 2 was originally going to be just a standalone film with a proper conclusion, so in reality they did not have enough story to merit an entirely new movie. But they tried to make it work anyway. With Tien captured and injured in the beginning of Ong-Bak 3, he must go off to recover and train while the evil crow demon guy gains more power and you know what? Who cares? I don't. After the fun though and perfect Ong-Bak, these two films combined seem like an insult to his legacy. They are weaker and less coherent than the first film and have no real connection to it except for the statue from Ong-Bak makes a tiny appearance. They could have titled these films something else, anything else, and they still would have been subpar, but it wouldn't have been as insulting. At the very least, much like Ong-Bak 2, this film does have some cool fights, and it's not just Tony Jaa that impresses, but also the martial artist and stuntman who plays the crow ghost thing, Dan Chupong, who doesn't have a whole lot of screen credits to his name, but is talented nonetheless. Still, the story of Ong-Bak 3 kept me less engaged than the second film, and eventually I was very tempted just to fast forward to the fight scenes. So, even though I don't own this one, it is the conclusion to this so-called trilogy, so I might as well rate it for you. And that rating is a 1. Unless you are really bored and have nothing better to do, don't bother. You would be better off leaving Ong-Bak 2 on a lame cliffhanger than watching this one. But if you're a fan of fight scenes and martial arts, Ong-Bak 2 and 3 have some really solid fight scenes to watch, but that's about it. After making these two craptastic films, Tony Jaa briefly retired from movies and became a monk, further fueling the rumors of his odd behavior on the set of Ong-Bak 2, and leaving many confused about what to think of his works. Sure, he had some iconic and amazing stunt work and fight scenes, but he left behind some confusingly poor films. After 3 years, he finally decided to come back to the world of martial arts films with The Protector 2, yet another disappointing and poorly made sequel to one of his movies. And he's also in the Fast and the Furious 7, or Fast 7, or Furious 7, or whatever the hell they're calling this one, so it seems he's finally making his break into Hollywood. Time will tell if he was just a flash in the pan with his one true success being Ong-Bak, or if he just had a bit of a rocky start and will become the next big thing, joining the ranks of Jet Li and Jackie Chan. Well, that's it for me this time. As always, for the DVD Shelf 4 and Flix, I'm the Spirited Killer, reminding you to watch out for flying elbows.